Welcome back. Today in our Sunday Spotlight, Connecticut in the movies. That's the topic and the title of actress and author Illeana Douglas's new book. She joins me in the studio. There's a picture of that book. And I got to tell you, Illeana, this might be the heaviest book of all. I always read the books, and I think you've got the heaviest book we've had a guest on. It's a coffee table size book.
Yes.
And I thought right at the very beginning, you said that the two things that make you happiest are Connecticut and movies.
Yes.
And you've combined them into a book. How did this come about?
Well, I always had this kind of idea that I felt like Connecticut didn't get its fair share of credit for the amount of movies that were made here. It's kind of like, you know, my own private Idaho, you know, but with Connecticut. And I had the idea to write the book, but I was in Los Angeles during COVID, and I started writing the book. And I started writing about all these plots of films and transformational and, you know, the New Yorker who goes to live in a Connecticut farm. And sure enough, I found myself at night scrolling through Zillow, looking at old farmhouses, and told a friend of mine who is a realtor, and she found me an old farmhouse in Connecticut, and I said, well, this makes sense. I'll finish the book in Connecticut. And that's when I kind of discovered I was writing about Mr. Blandings builds his dream house, and I was a real life Mrs. Blandings.
And you talk about that. You talk about it here, working on your dream house here in Connecticut. And
yes.
It's always cool to have Connecticut people on the show. I know you said you watched the show, which is very cool for us.
Yes.
One of the things I thought was interesting was just the scope of time that is spanned here. I mean, it starts with silent movies,
exactly,
and it goes right up to modern day. Is the connecting theme just Connecticut?
I call it a cinematic road trip through the state. There were discoveries that even I made that surprised me, but yet they're all connected. So I begin with William Gillette, who builds a castle on the Connecticut River. And then as we go into these, what I call the country living comedies, Christmas in Connecticut, where a house is very central to the story, and then Mr. Blandings and his dream house. And so it's connected. It goes from these silent films to this idea of Connecticut as a mythological place, the right place to live, and how America really came to think of Connecticut connected with suburbia. And then once we're in suburbia, that's where it gets sort of fascinating. That's part of the title, how we go from dream houses to dark suburbia.
Well, and so let's talk about those two things. I think those are probably the two biggest ways Connecticut has been in the movies. And the first is, you call them country living comedies. I got to check my notes. And that was, the general theme is man from New York City moves to Connecticut, meets the love of his life, and lives happily ever after.
Yes. So men out there should... you know, they have a transformational experience. Connecticut is presented as this idyllic place where people are down to earth. They have good country values. They're not slick, you know, like the city. You want to get out of the rat race, and you find out really who you are. And as I was writing about this experience, in plots, I found out how many times this actually really occurred, where, you know, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward move here. Marilyn Monroe marries Arthur Miller here. So there is a lot of truth to that idyllic background in Connecticut.
But then there's Dark Suburbia, a movie that I love, the man in the gray flannel suit, the struggling salesman always grasping for the next shiny thing, trying to keep his wife happy, trying to get the bigger house, the promotion. That kind of became Connecticut's MO.
It is. This is what's interesting, is after Mr. Blandings, we get into what I call the dark suburbia, which is now we're in suburbia, and that's where the cracks begin to appear. And we have almost this deconstruction of the American dream, of what Hollywood created, because I go into detail how some of this is real, but some of it, Hollywood created a perception of Connecticut that is sometimes not exactly accurate.
And I think the other thing that was cool about this was times where Connecticut was really just the backdrop to a movie as opposed to maybe the theme of it. And a movie I've never seen, It Happened to Jane, 1959, Jack Lemmon and Doris Day, certainly big-time stars there. The Essex Steam Train is featured. It's shot in Chester, and I thought this was cool considering my job. A WTIC reporter actually played himself in there.
Yes, absolutely. And that is an example of, again, the director, the movie was supposed to be made in Maine. He didn't like any of the locations. He got in his car. He saw this sign that said Chester. He drove into Chester. He said, this is where I want to make the movie. And the entire town of Chester participated in the making of the film. It's truly a Connecticut film. And so, you know, the book has movies for everybody. There's horror movies. There's also
Friday the 13th shot it. Friday the 13th Part 2 talks about the Bevan Bells from East Hampton and It's a Wonderful Life. Mystic Pizza, of course. And one thing I didn't know, Robert De Niro, starting with Jackknife in 1989, the most often Connecticut actor, I guess. I don't know how to say that.
He's made more films in Connecticut than any other actor. In fact, I tell a really beautiful story in Jackknife. He became friends with the tailor who provided him with a tuxedo, and they became lifelong friends. And every time he was here, he went and had dinner with the family. So it's all sorts of surprising connections like that.
Well, we only have about 30 seconds left, but I know you're going to be at the Kate in Old Saybrook in November.
Yes, November 15th with Colin McEnroe, and with every ticket you get a free book. And Christmas is coming, so.
And it is a cool book. It is a coffee table size book, and it's one of those books you could pick up, read a few pages, find out something you didn't know, maybe find a movie you want to, go on Netflix or Amazon or somewhere and watch.
Absolutely.
Put it back down, walk away from it, and come back, and it's just as interesting when you go to the next page a few days later.
There's about 100 films that really, I think, tell the story of Connecticut and make us, proud that we live here.
All right, Illeana Douglas, author and actress and viewer of CT23. Thank you for being with us, and we hope the book has a lot of success.
Thank you. Thanks
Again,
so much.
The book is called Connecticut in the Movies, From Dream Houses to Dark Suburbia. You can find it anywhere books are sold. That is CT23 for this week. CBS Sunday Morning is coming up next. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you back here next Sunday morning.